Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to the KaiNexus Continuous Improvement Podcast. I'm Mark Graban, and today we're doing a preview of the next webinar in our Continuous Improvement webinar series. It's going to be titled The Importance of Storytelling in Continuous Improvement. It's going to be held on September 7th, 1 o'clock Eastern. So if you want to register and attend live and be able to participate in the Q&A, you can go to kainexus.com/webinars or look for a link in the show notes. If you're hearing this after September 7th, look for the recording of the webinar either in our webinar library or on the KaiNexus YouTube channel. So we are joined today for a quick preview by the presenter of that webinar. He is Paul Critchley. Among other things, he's the president and he's a lean consultant at New England Lean Consulting. So Paul, how are you?
Good, Mark. How are you?
Doing great. I'm looking forward to your webinar. I think this challenge of trying to be better storytellers is I think that's something a lot of us, myself included, can work on. And so I want to ask the open-ended question to you as something else we probably all work on, asking better open-ended questions. Like why is this topic important to you? The importance of storytelling.
So I'll just tell you. So I am a big believer in storytelling, and I've crafted a lot of our content kind of around that. And even when we're dealing with or working with clients, I found, and this is just me, so this is probably some of my own personal biases coming out, but I find that people generally listen more. They hear it a little bit, they ingest it a little more if it's wrapped up in a story. Right. And I tell a lot of stories from my history. I am a mechanical engineer. I was in manufacturing for about 22 years or so before I, kind of ventured out on my own. So I tell a lot of stories about, this one time I was working at this place and here's what happened and here's what I could have done differently and it probably could have been better, or here's what we did and it actually worked out pretty good, right? People can resonate with that versus if I just show up, and I always joke if anybody's seen Office Space when the Bobs show up, like sometimes people look at me and they're like, well, you're like one of the Bobs, right? You're here to hack and slash and we're all going to get laid off. And
good luck with your layoffs, as Peter says, right?
Exactly. So if I just come in or anybody comes in any capacity and just says, well, we have to do this because we have to get costs down to 62% or on-time delivery up from 80 to 90% or whatever. It's like, okay, but that doesn't elicit like an emotional, like I want to do this because I want to hit that goal versus if you tell a good story, right? And you look at some of the business leaders, around they Steve Jobs, for instance, right? He had fans of Apple, and that's why, they were coming out with a new iPhone. They'd have lines around the corner just to get it because it was, I mean, granted, the product is great. I'm an iPhone user, but it's really that, people are like invested in the story of what this means. And I want to be a part of that. So when we tell stories about our own journeys and our own organizations, it's more like, I want to be a part of that.
Yeah. And what you're saying there about what I hear you saying is don't just focus on the logical, the numerical, the rational, that we have to tap into the emotional. I think of, former Toyota people I've learned from, we talk about engaging hearts and minds, head and heart. Like it's both, right?
Right. And as we're both engineers, right? So we commiserate there a little bit. So I like to believe, asterisks, I like to believe that I can look at data and say, the data tells me to do this, and that's what I'm going to go do. That's not necessarily true for everybody. And in fact, a lot of times it's not. Right. We can look at data, especially nowadays, and you say, well, is that really true? Right. There are lies, damn lies, and statistics, right? Those are the old joke. So I feel like when we can say, all right, listen, this happened to me, or I was a part of a team and this is how this went down, or something like that, it's a little bit more genuine, and it's easy to make up numbers, right? We see it all the time. Like, and you and I have chatted about this, and this is one of my pet peeves. 70% of lean transformations fail, or 95% fail, or whatever, pick a number. And it's like, where's that data come from? Yet you see it happen again and again and again. Right. So I could just sit here and make up a number. I'm like, I don't know, 82%, and people are like, maybe. Right. But if I have a story to say, here's why I think that, it's my experience, blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. It just has a little bit more context. It has a little bit more validity, I think, to it. And again, we're talking about, there's continuous improvement, and then respect for people, and certainly engagement is part of that respect for people piece. Yeah. And I think that storytelling helps us get there.
Yeah. And you could use stories to help pique people's interests about how you do things, about why you do things. So I think in terms of healthcare, we could talk about data and say, well, an organization can and maybe should be able to reduce something like central line associated bloodstream infections by 90% in a relatively short period of time through standard work and engaging people and making it easier to do the right thing and practices and principles that we would know from lean. But I think when you can turn data into stories of like, well, what's the impact on a person, a patient, and their family of what happens when they do get one of these infections or when they don't? Not just what's the cost, financial cost of treating the infection, but what's the cost of, let's say, the difficulty in recovering. I think stories, and that's one of the lessons I think of from Paul O'Neill, the former CEO of Alcoa, numbers guy, you might say, business leader. And he would always emphasize, you've got to turn safety numbers, whether it was employee safety or patient safety. It can't just be about the numbers. You want to know the names of the people who got hurt and the story. I think that really connects and resonates and inspires people more so than numbers ever could.
100% agree. I'll tell you a real quick story. I was the plant manager of a medical device company, and we made radiology skin markers. And predominantly, these were for cancer. So, for instance, in a mammogram, sometimes you have to hit the breast with so much X-ray energy that it burns the skin line out. So our marker was there to show up on film or, on a screen. So doctors could know if I have to go in for a core biopsy later, I have something to measure off of. And, so we're making what we make, and they're just little labels. They're basically, like little tiny Band-Aids, and we glue stuff to them. But to your point, it was, well, wait a second though, if we screw this up, let's face facts. Cancer is a scary thing. It's touched everybody I know. Nobody when you go in for a biopsy, you want to make sure that after that you get an answer one way or the other. What you don't want to hear is, not sure, something screwed up, we're going to have to go in again. It's, having lived through that with, parents and friends, so we took that at our place very seriously. And to your, we used to have, we'd get emails and stuff from nurses that had dealt with patients, in good ways, that said, hey, you guys really helped out because you had this available. And, we're always, with the quality you guys have, it's always very good. Where these other folks, sometimes on film, some materials can actually look like what cancer looks like. So you never want to have a false positive,
right.
Or worse, false negative, one way or either way, right? It's both bad. But to your point, it's, it's not just about what you do and hitting the numbers and costs and quality and all that stuff. It's the value that we're bringing, that we're trying to deliver.
Yeah. And I've seen that when I worked at Johnson & Johnson on, with medical products, how powerful it was when they would bring in customers, patients whose lives were affected positively by a certain type of testing that had been developed. Or, I had a chance to do some continuous improvement training at a biotech company. And as part of that meeting, the speaker, 100 times more powerful than anything I could have shared, was a customer talking about how their life has been extended and bettered because of these products. Like, that's so motivating for for people to go back and then think of, well, why would I try to do anything related to continuous improvement? It's not because of anything I said, it's because of what that patient emphasized around their mission and their purpose. And those are stories. Yeah.
Yep. 100%.
So there's a lot to cover in the webinar. Again, it's September 7th. Paul Critchley presenting about the importance of storytelling in continuous improvement. Thinking about the culture and the values that unite and inspire people. And maybe a final question for you, Paul. You've touched on it, but how would you summarize the connection of storytelling to continuous improvement? Like, why should people attend the webinar here to learn what you're going to share in relation to their continuous improvement work?
Sure. I believe that there's a proven framework that we can follow step by step that help us tell better stories to, be able to invoke that emotional response that allows people to get emotionally invested into these things. Like I said, I've made the mistake, having worked in manufacturing, of coming out and saying, hey, everybody, we need to do this because we got to take this metric from here to here. And it went about as good as you would suspect, right? Yeah. Which was not very. But by following the steps of being able to tell a story and learning the power of opening up, both good and bad, and allowing people, just to get to know each other a little bit more and know the reasons why behind what they do or why they should do what you're asking of them, I think is very, very powerful. Yeah. And I think we would be much more successful, with continuous improvement and adoption if we followed that process.
Yeah. Well, good. Well, I look forward to the presentation. Again, if you're hearing this ahead of September 7th, you can go and register now at KaiNexus.com/webinars, or look for the direct registration link in the show notes. If you're hearing it after September 9th or after September 7th, or after September 9th, you can use that same link to go and register to view the recording, or you can find the recording in our podcast feed or our YouTube channel. And speaking of podcasts, Paul was the host for a couple of years of a podcast, the New England Lean podcast, right?
Yep.
So encourage.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I don't know if I just a blog post of our own announcing that we have new offices. So no promises, but we might be dusting off the podcast and revamp and rebirthing it. So it might be out there again.
Well, cool. Well, generally speaking, as they say, what's on the internet is forever, and your podcasts are out there. So I encourage Paul to go, or encourage the audience to go listen to Paul's episodes and interviews with people. It's out there. It's great stuff. And I'm sure you'll hear a lot of stories. So you're going to hear stories in the presentation. Again, Paul Critchley, President and Lean Consultant at New England Lean Consulting. Thanks in advance for doing the webinar, and thanks for joining us here today.
No problem. Thank you.